There they are.
There it is. Hey, everyone.
There it is.
Trivium, we're back with our weekly television update. We got Josh with us here today, producer. Say hello, Josh.
How you doing, everybody?
People out there. Yeah, we wanted to have a chat with you. People are always asking us about all the ins and outs of like how we record stuff, so we figured it'd be awesome to get you on here to actually talk about all those things because you know it better than us. So yeah, maybe we could start with like maybe a little bit of your story of like how you got into like mixing and producing, like how you got to work with Andy Wallace and kind of the route it took you into this world.
Sure. Let's see. I mean, I think I started like everybody, right? Like you play in a band when you're in high school and just kind of get involved in enjoying the recording process of it. Maybe also realizing at the same time I'm not as good of a musician as I thought that I was, but I'm real good at recording other ones. So, I was just playing in bands in high school until I moved to New York. I got an internship, went to like a 2-year school, came back and ended up mopping floors at a studio in New York from midnight to late in the morning. And worked my way through the ranks. Like became an assistant engineer, became a house engineer, got picked up by a pop group, and ended up with this Full Force Productions doing a bunch of pop records. I had met Andy at Soundtrack. I'm really like rapping like 5 years into like 30 seconds here.
This is the too long didn't read version of it.
Yeah. And I ended up doing a bunch of pop, hip hop, and R&B records for a couple years, and then I moved back. And I went back one day to visit with Andy Wallace just because I hadn't seen him in a long time, and I was still friends with everybody at that studio. And he was like, "Hey, you available to do some work tomorrow?" I was like, "Yeah." And then I edited drums for him on something. I don't remember what it was. I think it was Shinedown or Seether. I actually don't remember, but I just got hired real quick by him to do something, and then after that, his management called me and were like, "Hey, you want to go to LA and like do some like Pro Tools work on this System of a Down record?" And I was like, no. No, I actually said no because I'd been working with Full Force for like 2 years doing pop records, and I was afraid they were like not going to take me back and I was going to lose my gig. And then I like sat on it for like 24 hours and I'm like, what the fuck am I thinking? Of course I want to do this. And I like called management back. I was like, is it still okay to say like, yeah, I want to go to LA and do that System of a Down thing? And they were like, man, we never even told them you said no.
What record was that?
They know now.
It was the Steal This album record. It was like a bunch of B-sides. But it all had to be assembled.
You're the kombucha mushroom people. You are the
I had to like some of it was on tape, and they had tracked other things on Pro Tools, and it was like a total nightmare. They had edited the songs in Pro Tools, and
oh my god,
it became like it was like an organizational nightmare that they needed someone to like pull it all together. So
were some of the first projects you worked on? Were you still using tape at any of the first few years of you doing stuff?
Yeah,
that's always. I feel like that's like one of the. That's such a crazy thing, like because I feel like now, I mean, we've never done any of our records to tape or anything, but just like seeing those machines in the corner and just like how precise you had to be with the cuts to edit things, like it's wild. Like going from that, and then in like a few decades, it's like digitally changed everything.
Yeah, I remember my last record on tape actually. Because I think it's still, I have a picture of that tape machine as like the home screen on my phone for the last decade plus. But like we were recording with Garth Richardson up in Vancouver. I used to do a lot of engineering for him. And we had been doing things on Pro Tools for a while at that point. So I had probably been a year or so away from a tape machine, but he wanted to track the drums to tape. But we had it locked up to Pro Tools, so at any given point, we could just transfer it over and do whatever we needed. And he was like, all right, let's punch in the bridge, on the tape, on the drums. And I was like, cool, let me just like safety it off into Pro Tools first. And he was like, no, let's just do the punch. And I'm like, he wants more than anything for me to botch this punch. Like he is begging for me to blow it so he can rip on me. And I remember looking at him like, okay, all right, been a little while, but I got this. Like, because there's an art to punching on tape. You have to be a little early and a little late coming out, or vice versa. Like, because where the heads sit, where the playback and the record head is, it's like there's an actual technique to it.
Yeah, now it's just a fancy plugin on Pro Tools
Yes.
that just has the machine going. That doesn't really mean anything, but it looks cool.
It's a sweet graphic.
Do you feel like the plugin is like comparable to it though? Do you think it's like within the ballpark of like analog?
Honestly, when I switched, because I used to be an SSL guy, I used to mix completely on SSLs, and I was, wasn't one of the first dudes to switch over to in the box. I was pretty late in the game on that, and it was a hard transition for me because the console did things, and the analog stuff did things that I wasn't even aware that it was doing at the time. Like maybe like the channel was overloading and like clipping something, and I just liked how it sounded. I didn't necessarily think about what it was doing. And then, so all of a sudden I'm mixing in the box and I'm like using the SSL channel strip, and I'm like, why is this not sounding the same? It's supposed to be the same. It's not the same. And, it took a while for me to kind of come up with a new, like, I know the records I mixed, like my first couple of records that were mixed totally in the box, and I'm still like, oh God, I can't listen to that. Like, just stress out thinking about it. I think Gaugier L'Enfant Sauvage was literally the second record I mixed in the box.
Damn.
Oh.
Maybe the third.
So that wasn't that long ago then that you switched.
I think it's longer than we think.
Maybe.
It has to be I still lived in New York back then, so it had to be like 10 years or less.
All right. Well, I guess maybe we can dive into some of these fan questions because they had a lot
I've got a thing that I wanted to chat with everybody because I know everyone always wants to talk about vocals. This was a really interesting story I felt because people have been saying like how aggressive and how angry we all sound in a good way, in a complimentary way. Like vocally, I've never sounded this way, but there was a really interesting thing that happened on Sin of the Sentence that made me determine that Josh was the perfect guy to work with Trivium. And that is, so basically the five of us, we're always having a good time. The five of us are always like happy-go-lucky. It's just making jokes, it's eating good food, and wanting to be really good at what we do. That's the vibe of the five of us. When there's one day in the middle of vocals where I came in, I was having a bad day. It was a bad day in the world, bad day in my own personal world. And I assumed that my vocals should sound pretty good. I remember Josh and I, we kept hitting takes. And finally, we both looked at each other like, all right, let's call it a day. Let's wrap it up. So we wrapped it up. Came in the next day. Everything was back to normal. We're all telling jokes, good vibe, good mood. Came in and redid the same stuff in between like laughing about stuff. And I sounded 10 times more authentically pissed off in a good way than ever by doing this. So I've found out that the five of us all do so well by wanting to work really hard and being really goofy and being in a good mood. And it's amazing. I've never worked with someone like Josh where having that direct feedback when I do something well, and it's not that I'm looking for like compliments. That's not what Josh is doing, but like I'm feeling something came out good. I look over and Josh is like jumping up and down with his arms. He's like, yeah, like that, dude, that pumps me up so much. Like even just seeing that, like I'm ready to record now. And that's such an interesting vibe that we drew out the most aggressive sounding 2 records of our career with Josh out of just having a good time. And I don't know if that's really a question. It's more of a statement of how much I love working with you, Josh.
Well, you got a pretty good aggressive catalog. So I'm a fan of some of a lot of the early stuff too. So, my point, if we're not having fun making records, like why are we even doing this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
I say
the
that
whole
about
point,
people
right?
in everything. Yeah. If you're in a band, you better be enjoying it.
I actually got thinking about something working with you guys and a couple of the bigger bands that I've worked with, that it's funny how unique this is to a couple of bands that I work with. And it's that, like, when we make the Trivium record, I don't remember a time ever where we referenced another band. Like, we never listened to another band. When I mixed, I never listened to anything else. I just mixed what I had and what felt right for the record that we were making. I think that's like a pretty important thing that's like missed a lot of things. Like a lot of bands spend so much time, like nothing drives me more nuts as a producer mixer. Someone's like, I want it to sound like, and they reference some other band. I'm like, why do you want to do that? Like, can't we just get something awesome here that we all like and high five and just make our own thing? And I feel like some of the better records come about when we're just focused on doing what we want to do rather than what other people want us to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. And we never even referenced like old Trivium stuff. Like we never really queued up Ascendancy, for example, in the studio and said, all right, let's look for that tone. We just always know. I think it's because the five of us, you know, Alex during Trivium and before Trivium, Josh during Trivium, before Trivium, and the three of us as well, we all have put in so much time of practice and doing what we do and doing what we love that, yeah, we never have to think about it because it's so natural to this point. And that's why these records are the way they are. Like, we've been doing all the promo tour stuff from home, and I feel like that's why I've got a lot of these default Hafey statements ready to go. But there's only been a time, 3 times in our career, Crusade, Silence, and Vengeance, where we said we have to stay in a lane. Let's stay here. Let's not go too over here, too far over there. But Sin and Deadman, we never set any limits. We never said we shouldn't do this or shouldn't do this or shouldn't go this fast or shouldn't have this kind of song. We just went for it and never second guessed anything. Really, the only thing that I loved about the last record that I referenced in a chat that Josh wasn't here about Josh, remember we were blowing through this one so fast. One day you were like, I got to make sure this is good. I'm not sure. This is going so fast. I'm not sure. Is it good? And then the next day you're like, yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Sometimes they're moving so fast. I'm like, wait, whoa, hold on. I'm not even sure what song we're working on right now.
and to give everyone perspective, this one was fast, right? Like 16 days is pretty quick.
Well, that was 16 in Orlando.
Well,
16
in
Orlando.
16
13 and 3.
Like
13 and 3, I thought.
No, I think I think in LA for at least 3 or 4
16.
days.
We were recording at 6:06 from like Monday through Friday, because we finished like our Paul and I's vocals on the last day of we were in the studio.
Yeah,
I want to ask.
Setting up
we need to
drums
have
takes a day
more.
on its own.
We need to have.
I wanted to ask this question from someone. This I think applies to what we did because this is the first time we did this on the record, and someone was asking, Josh, where you got the idea to flip doing the drums last on a record as opposed to recording them first. Like when we first worked with you, it was like drums first and then everything else. And then this one we switched to this other style. Like what made you come up with that?
A lot of it's logistics. I mean, realistically, you know, every record I've ever done, I come in with what I think. I have a plan on how I'm going to do the record. And very often I think one of my biggest strengths is being able to change my plan in the middle of it or when like approached with a band that wants to work slightly different. I think we decided just based on scheduling, right? And also like if you do drums last, the theory you back up. Like generally speaking, you go in and you like if you're gonna track, you could either track all live as a band, which Trivium's actually one of the bands that could handle doing that. You guys are tight enough players, but nobody ever wants to do that, and I understand why. So then the next theory is, well, we're going to put up a click. Matt and Corey are going to just do like a quick pass through on the guitars, not really paying attention too much. And then Alex is supposed to play to the click and the scratch guitars. But like, I mean, what sense does that really make if he's playing to the click and the scratch guitars? Because they're going to be loose. And 9 out of 10 times when I have a drummer doing that, they're like, can you turn the guitars down for this part? Like, I just need to lock into the click. Like, so what are we actually playing to? Like,
yeah.
It's just a placeholder, the scratch guitars. There's not even where it's going to be. The drums are focused more on the clicks. So if we program the drums, quantize them perfect, but move, like you guys remember how we all did it. We went in Alex played it. We moved clicks. We changed tempos up and down. We shifted. We played it to the click and made sure that nobody felt the changes. Like it just felt natural, right? That's kind of the general. If the click's moving and the drummer's hearing it, but nobody else is, and they just think the song feels right, then we probably got the template correct. So with that in mind, we use these perfect drums. The guitars lock in, play everything perfect to that. And then when Alex plays, he's playing to like perfect guitar takes. And like he doesn't even necessarily he can listen, obviously he can have the click in there, but he can actually lock into what the guitars are doing. And in a weird way, I end up having to edit less because he's so locked in when he's playing.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did that answer the question at all?
Yeah. I mean, Alex, how did you feel about that? Like, because
and he gets to play to the record.
Really yeah. I mean, what was the
I do not
difference
get to play the record.
What was the difference from like the last record to this, or any record you've done before where you didn't record drums to the end?
Yeah, doing it like this, it was the first time for me, and I was in heaven. I mean, I was playing along. It was really able to help me get a good vibe, I think when it comes to recording and tracking, it's all about catching that special vibe and hearing the the vocals and the guitar and the bass. It just made everything just feel so like heavy and natural. So I feel like it brought a lot out of me, you know. And yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that next time we could do it the same way.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
You're in hot heaven.
Yeah, this way was really cool.
Hog
I
heaven.
I love too how you explained before with us to us, Josh, about how when there's accents that happen vocally that are typically recorded last after drums, that you kind of lose that. And then if you do vocals before the drums, you can get those stabs of vocal accentuations with the drums after the fact, which I think is huge. That's a harder thing to do later on.
Yeah, because if you think about it, drums are logistically are the most expensive and the biggest ship to steer, right? It's like the biggest, most intense mic setup on the record. It's the most expensive studio time because, you know, we're going to go into a studio and like we need the large facility and everything. So the other main reason to do it, the other big reason to do it that way is if we do drums first, very often if the vocals aren't done, they're going to dictate like how long this part goes. You know, and a lot of times in the writing process and demoing process, you're like, yeah, I think the vocals are going to be like this. I'll dial it in when we actually make the record. Then you do dial it in and you're like, you know what, this should go one more cycle just for a setup, or we should do this. If you've already tracked the drums and you're doing vocals last, you're like, okay, I can edit the drums. I can move this and maybe I can steal a fill from over here. And like, you're kind of trying to make do with what you had rather than creating for what's there.
Mm-hmm. I remember you also saying that doing like having the MIDI drums and doing drums last, like if we're recording and stuff, like if we're like, hey, we get like a last minute like arrangement change or change a part, it's like way easier to edit that way than trying to edit like 20 something channels of like mics of acoustic drums and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. When Alex, like, you know, we did all the pre-pro and Alex helped set all the tempos and played through on the electric kit. And then, you know, Alex left. We had MIDI drums, cut rhythm guitars. Then Matt starts cutting vocals. And all of a sudden that exact scenario happens, right? We're like, oh, shoot, this should really come. Or actually, Bleed Into Me was completely rearranged after pre-pro. Like
that was the hardest song structurally for us, which is so weird. It was the easiest song, hardest for structure.
Yeah, and which was funny because when I heard it, I was like, "This is easy. It just goes like this." But that structure change could have never happened had we done drums first, or we would have been setting up again and recutting drums, and it'd have been a total nightmare. But as it turns out, we changed the MIDI, moved things around. You know, the rhythm guitars moved in bricks. Maybe we punched like a slide or a transition or whatever had to happen, but it was an easy fix. Next thing you know, when Alex hears it, he's like, whoa, okay, let me go write my drum parts.
I'm not fucking playing this shit. Change it back.
I'm doing the original or I'm not doing it at all.
The original was better.
Well, I guess since we're talking about drum stuff, something that some people were asking about was kind of like mic setup stuff, but in particular, like one thing, you know, I think that's noticeable with like a lot of your mixes. I mean, of course, like Lamb of God and Gojira, like the cymbals are so crystal clear in the mix. Like, could you maybe give kind of a rough idea of like how you approach maybe mixing cymbals into like the mix? That's definitely probably one of the hardest parts.
Most of the a lot of the reasons I pick studios that I work at nowadays, there's actually a lot of studios nowadays that don't have consoles, and I really, really, really prefer recording drums in a studio with a large format console. Like Hybrid Studios is one of my favorites to work at. 606 was great. I mean, there's lots of great studios. But the reason I do that is I have a pretty elaborate setup on the miking, but it allows me a lot of control in the mix to get that clarity in the cymbals in particular. So like on Alex's kit, for example, like I'm trying to actually remember, we used a lot of Rode mics, and we used so I always do top and bottom on all the toms. And the reason I like a console where I track is because I always do top and bottom. I can bust those two out of one channel and just record one channel in Pro Tools. So when I'm looking at it, you know, Alex, what do we have, like 6 toms on this record or 5 or something? It was a lot.
Yeah, it was quite a bit. It was the same as last time, just a whole bunch.
That's 6, I think. Maybe.
I think 6.
like
5 or 6.
3, 4, 5. Yeah, 6.
That's how,
Yeah.
that's how you know it's
So
a lot when you
if you think on toms alone, that's 12 that's 12 tracks or 12 microphones, top and bottom, but they're all bussed in, and what I end up in Pro Tools is only 6, because heaven knows I don't want to see 12 tracks of toms in Pro Tools. That drive me insane. And then on cymbals, I'll do, depending on the setup, every drummer is a little bit different, but I generally only stay I don't know, 18 inches or so away from the cymbal, and I kind of do them individual, or clusters, I guess, if you could think of it that way. I don't really use much of an overhead perspective. Sometimes I'll set up an overhead if the drummer has a kit that's very not symmetrical. I might do an overhead kit just to kind of put the cymbals, I don't want them to just sound like they're one that's over here, or some drummers, their kits are very right heavy, they always are on these cymbals, they're always on these cymbals. So maybe I'll change up how I do it for something like that, but I'll do cluster cymbals about 18 inches away, so that way I can control each cymbal for the most part individually, the volume. This sounds like a boring conversation. We really
No.
People,
that's what they
always. People
So what
EQ
EQ suite do you like to use on your cymbals?
I'm just like, wow. And then
I
Everyone's
think
laughing
a
at my
lot
chat
of people, obviously, we know a little bit about our gear and stuff, but where it kind of goes from our playing and through our normal gear, it's just kind of those other extra things that I think maybe people don't understand with what you do. It's you're thinking about the entire thing in one go. It's so every time you're recording something, thinking about the next couple steps ahead of okay, well, this is where the drums are going to be. And it's to kind of know I didn't even know that with the drums of how the shape of a drum set can really affect how you mic it. That's kind of a crazy thing to think about.
I spend time thinking about when I'm miking up drums, especially on a single bass kit. If you think about it, someone who plays a single bass kit, the kick drum's dead center, right? And then but their snare is actually off to the left of it, right? So if you get a mic up the center above the kick and the snare, in the overheads, if you have say an XY or whatever, the kick's going to lean slightly right and the snare's going to lean slightly left. That drives me insane. So I'll always look at the kicks, the center of the kit. If you've got a kick here and a snare drum here, if you're looking down on the kit, I'll set the mic access coming across it like that. And if you think about it, if you look how a drummer sets up their kit, let's say it's a 5-piece kit with 3 toms. By moving the XY from what you would traditionally think is the center to this, you've actually got tom 2 in the center now. Tom 1 is in the left. Tom,
crazy.
You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
All it really takes, your mind makes you think that the kick drum is the center of the kit because that's how they set it up on the rug. But the reality is the center is like this. Does that make sense?
Wow.
Everyone with OCD right now is scratching their face and walking around.
That's
triggered
amazing.
all of them.
That's
So much detail. Wow.
Josh, I think would be
Geometry 101 with Josh Wilbur.
Well, and also so if I'm miking a cymbal over here and a cymbal over here, I usually use a drumstick and I kind of eyeball it, but I'm okay, is this one about the same distance from the snare? Is this one, to make sure that it's all going to even out. It's the setup of the kit is everything. And, I try to make it a point because I've heard that other producers will tell the drummer they can't set up the kit the way that they're setting it up. You got to move this over here and move this. I'd like you to play the way you're comfortable. And I'd like to think that I can find a way to figure it out and make it work if I'm a decent engineer.
I love those stories of producers that do things to their instrumentalists. I was going to make up a story that Josh put me in a porta potty and kicks it over and hits it with a truck and they have to track vocals or something. That stuff doesn't work. That stuff doesn't work at all.
What was this story Paolo, wasn't there?
Everybody needs different motivation.
He's put a gun on Alex.
Yeah, Paolo, you were saying you were going to start a rumor that Josh Wilbur starved me in the studio, didn't feed me for a week.
What did we say? He kept you in a dirty, filthy pig pen, and you had to wear a pig nose and walk on all fours. That's why you track so well. Josh, would it be interesting for everybody? What quirks that maybe the four of us have when we're tracking that we don't know that everyone would find interesting. Nothing like they pick their butt or something. What kind of is there a quirk? Like I don't know. I'm sure I have them, but I don't know.
Of course there are quirks, but if I feel like but I feel like in telling you them it ruins my you'll
have to find new ones
on the next record.
Yeah.
You'll have to find new
He has
ones.
to know how to. He has to know how to work.
And we figured out the key thing for me. Like shoeless is something I figured out. Like I have to be barefoot or at least be in socks to sing better in key. Really? Yeah. I always take my shoes off for singing. But the other thing we figured out this last one, yes, the ear like this, like slightly off, but also having the headphone volume really low. We're having actually my vocals where I can't really hear them and the music just an okay level versus up here and up here like I do for shows.
I think for screamers, that's like a pretty common thing. Like you want to like feel like you're battling through the band like you do at a show a little bit.
Everyone wants you to let us know these things, but I guess
I'll tell you,
do you feel like every
I think it's interesting that Paulo plays standing up.
Yeah, that is.
Like I don't know of anybody else in the studio that stands when they record.
I don't want to stand and play guitar while I record.
And then but then likewise you always have the whatever.
I bring my own stool, my own drum stool, and my own footstool.
Yeah. I feel like the standing thing is like I haven't been doing that super long, but I kind of felt like just like on the last record, I don't know what it was. It was like sometimes when I'm like sitting down and trying to find the perfect like spot to be comfortable, it almost kind of psychs me out more than when I'm just standing up. I just feel like more comfortable, like I'm just like at rehearsal or something. I don't know if it's kind of like maybe a mental thing even.
I think comfort, and actually one of the things I like that we did when you tracked bass, which maybe we've forgotten about it or haven't, but like I don't know if you remember, I moved the speakers so that you were playing standing between two sets of monitors, and I was actually outside the center section so that you could hear your performance like more clearly than I could, and then I'd switch it over to my set of monitors so that I could check it after the fact.
Yeah, that was actually really good.
I actually started doing that on Gojira on L'Enfant Sauvage, just to put the player between the speakers and have my own set and switch between depending on if someone's playing.
That was very good because it's kind of tough when you're playing like put it over to one side and then you have to kind of mess with that, and turning it back to kind of monitor it.
You're leaning over my shoulder like, does that sound good? I don't know. I can't hear anything over here.
I feel like since you brought up Gojira, we should address the laser squeak sound. We should address that because everyone, anytime they hear that, like, oh, that's the Gojira rake. And I learned it from Joe. Joe actually talked with Gojira first time in like 2007 or so in the UK. And I love that sound. I was like, Joe, because I've been a fan from Mars to Sirius. Joe, how the heck do you make that sound? So he came down, he taught me how to do the rake. He taught me how to do the other thing he does, that palm strike off the G, B, and E strings, like, and I asked him where he got it from, and he said he learned the idea from 90s death metal, which I thought was so cool. He said particularly from Morbid Angel, and so he's like passed that rake down. I think it's amazing that now people call that the Gojira sound, which is pretty awesome that they have a laser sound.
I called it that when I'd call it when I did the record. I don't think when I started the record with them, they had any of them in there, and I was like, "Where's the?" like so, begging them to put it into songs.
I've had a lot of people were like, "Oh, the Gojira thing," and I was like, "Well, Joe taught it to me. He got it from 90s death metal from Tampa, which is pretty awesome. That it made that full cycle. That it went from Florida to France back to Florida."
Joe told me that Hetfield handed him a guitar and was like, "Show me how you do that."
Come up with some sound on a guitar that people want to learn from me. I don't know what the heck that would.
Into the mic or scream into the pickup.